for Indiana is
A
impressive.
huge deal.
Like in hoops, it's expected, right?
Right.
So that first thing I taught us, it's been a long time since Indiana's been basketball.
Yeah, but we've never been good at football.
Ever.
So, there are shirts that say "I'm a Hoosier with a football problem." Okay, Shabbat shalom, everyone. Happy to talk Indiana sports anytime. We're gonna be on page 214 in the Siddur that you have in front of you. Thanks, Brian. I'm guessing.
Ashrei Ashrei Veitecha Od Yalu Chasela. Tilatanu Dever Pi V'Recha B'Sar Shekel Shalom V'Ed V'Anachnu Nevarach Yam Yetaber Olam Hallelujah. ואתה קדוש ישב תהילות ישראל וקרא זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו ותישאני ברוך ואשמע אחרי כל רעש גדול ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ויפתחו בך ידי שמך כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה ויאדיר יקדש ויקדש מרבה ויעמד דברי קריאותי וימלך מלכותי בחייכם ובימיכם ובחיי כל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן יהי שמי רבך ולבך לעולמי מיה יפרח וישתבח ויפרח וידרום וילסה ויתהדר ויתהדר שמר קודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בימיו ויאמרו אמן ויהי בן סהרון ויאמר משה קום אדוני ויפותו יבך וינוסו משנאך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה דבר אדוני מירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו גדול אדוני איתי ונרום שמו יחדיו
לך אדוני דולה ורב תפארת ונצח והוד כי חוב השמיים ובארץ הכל נמחה ונעשה לכל לראש רב אדוני כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו Sorry?
Page 250.
Thank you so much. We're on page 250.
It's not helpful here.
And there are no page numbers this week?
Scroll.
Is it there?
Yeah.
Anybody want an aliyah? Reckoning with the first one? ותיגלה ותרם אחותו למזון קרוב וחופת שבלתם הפני שלך נחץ רחמי רצם למרמי הכל בנוי כבוד לתורה תעמוד חובת יעקב Rivka b'chava v'yakov v'aliyah rishon baruch shatan torah l'maisra b'kedushato. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. ויהי מקץ שנתיים ימים ברוך עולם והנה עומד על היאור והנה מן היאור עולות 7 פרות פרות מראה ובריאות בשר ותראנה בכו והנה 7 פרות אחרות עולות אחרי כן מן היאור רעות מראה ודקות בשר ותמוד ניץ על הפרות על שפת היאור ותאכל הפרות רעות המראה ודקות הבשר את 7 פרות יפות המראה והבריאות ויקץ פרעה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. אמן. יעמוד ראובן מאיר בן גרשון ומלכה לעלייה השנייה.
Page 250, verse 5, last line.
Sorry that I don't have anything else. Oh, yes. You're good.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Amvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vaishan ve'achalom shemit v'hinei 7 shibulim olot v'kaneh echad b'riot v'tovot v'hinei 7 shibulim dakot ushtufot kadim tzomchot achrechen v'tivlana hashibulim hadakot al 7 shibulim habri et 7 hashibulim habriot v'hamleot v'ikatz paro v'ikatz paro v'hinei cholam.
Almost there.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. You don't have to say yes. I'm just offering.
You should be a union organizer.
I am, I think. Ya'amad.
Yitzchak ben Yeshua.
Yitzchak ben Yoshua Ashley Sheep.
Page 251, verse 8.
Baruch Hu Adonai Baruch.
Baruch
Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu es toraso. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Vayhi v'boker v'tipach emrucho v'yishlach v'yikra kol hartumei Mitzrayim kol chachamecha v'yisaper paro lachem et cholamo v'poter otam leParo v'yidaber tzar mashchit et Paro lemor et chachatai ani maskir ayom Paro ketzav alabadav vayiten oti b'mishmar beitzar tabachim oti etzar ha'ofim v'nafim v'nachalama v'nachal machalom b'layla echad ani v'hu ish kefitron chalamo chalamnu v'shamitanu na'ivri eved l'sar ha'tabachim nisaper lo v'yiftar lanu et cholamotenu ish kolachamo pater patar v'yi kasher pater lanu ken chaya et hayoshev al kanfe oti al kani ve'oti ve'oto chala Vayishlach Paro, Vayikra et Yosef, Vayirtzu min habor, Vayigalach, Vayachalef, Simlotaha, Vayavo el Paro. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher nosan lanu Torah, semes v'chayei olam otah b'socheinu, Baruch atah Adonai noseinu Torah. Amen.
Yeah, Amod Hamagbiya. Brian, do you want to rap for us? Sure. Yeah, Amod Hagolah. Please rise. There's a Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael pi Adonai ve'ad Moshe eitz chaim hi lamachazikim ba v'tomechei amem shar eitz chaim hi lamachazik ba v'tomechei amem shar Darcheinu v'chol netivotei shalom. Darcheinu v'chol netivotei shalom. Page 221.
Yahallelu Hashem Adonai, ki mishmat shemo levado. Odo al eretz v'shamayim, v'yaren kedem yamo. Tila lecha chasidav, levanei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Melech HaKavod, nice vote. Who Melech HaKavod, Selah. Uvnecho Yomar. Et Chaim hi lamachazikim ba betomcheha meutshar deracheha darkeinu am bechol netivotecha shalom hashi Adonai elecha v'na Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem Yitkadav Yitkadash Merabah B'yamad Yivra Kirutei V'mechmachotei B'chayechonu V'yamechonu V'chayedecho B'Yisrael Ba'agalav Zman Karev Yimeru Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Li'olam Li'omei Amaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yipar V'yiromah V'yinaseh V'yitadav 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 Shemei Kudesha Le'ela Min Kol Berachata V'shirata Tishbachata V'nechemata Damiram V'yamah V'yimeru.
Page 223. Now you finished your Amidah. Please continue at your own pace. Elon will begin the repetition for us on page 223. We'll join together with him for the Kedusha on page 225.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu v'Eloheinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah El Gadol Gibor v'Nora El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim v'Kanei Yaakov V'Zocher Chasdei Avot U'Mavi Goel Livnei V'neihem Neman Shemo V'Yava Melech Chozer Ufoked U'Mashiach Magen Baruch Ata Adonai Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח מוריד הגשם, מחכה החיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ורופא חולים מתיר סורים, ומקיים מנתה לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיי מצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב היד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך כל הארץ כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני מקומו דברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד גדלך, נצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושפחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. אתה קדוש ושמך הקדוש, קדושים בכל יום יעלו לסלע, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. אתה אחד ושמך אחד ומי כעמך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ תפארת גדולה ויתרת ישועה יום מנוחה קדושה לעמך נתת אברהם יגל יצחק ירנן יעקב ובניו ינוחו בו מנוחת אהבה ונדבה מנוחת אמת ואמונה מנוחת שלום ושלווה והשקט ובטח מנוחה שלמה שאתה רוצה בה יכירו עיניך וידעו כי מאיתך היא מנוחתם ויום מנוחתם יקדישו את שמך אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו רצה מנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלתנו בתורתך סבנו בטובך ושמחנו בישועתך ותעליבנו לעבדך באמת וחנכנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה ורצון שבת קדשך וינוחו ישראל מקדש שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל תפילתם והשבת עבודה לדביר ביתך ותפילתם באהבה תתקבל ברצון ותהי רצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך ותחזן עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון מודים אנחנו לך שאתה נראינו ועבדנו. שבחה כן. הטוב כי חלו רחמך ורחם כי תתמו חסדיך מעולם קיווינו לך שלום רב על ישראל עמך וכל כל יושבי תבל ותשים לעולם כי אתה הוא מלך אדון לכל השלום וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. צדק לעולם בתורתך אמת ותתך אלוהים עד מרום אשר עשית גדולות אלוהים מי כמוך צדקתך כהרי אל משפטך תהום רבה אדם ובחמה תושיע אדוני יתגדל ויקדש מרבה ביעמה דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון וחייך בישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. Yeshmer Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Me'amaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpar V'yidromam V'yinaseh V'yitadar V'yitadav V'yitadash Medekudshah B'rechu Le'ela Min Kol Brachata V'shirata Tishbachata V'nechmata Damiram B'yama V'yimru Amen Titkabel Sotchon U'vatchon D'cho Yisrael Kadam U'vahon D'bishmaya V'yimru Amen Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'yimru Amen O Seh Shalom Ben Ramav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen Aleinu L'shabach L'Adonai ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. ביעמה דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמי עמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בימה ויאמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן Oseh Shalom Ben Ramav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen.
Amen. Yeshakach, Tzilan. We are going to now get some food and then come back and we'll start some learning in about 10-ish minutes. You're off. Sure. Or have to listen to repeat. You can take a nap. I can come and get you. Now do we start recording? So I'm standing up there, like, as if I've never got by the service before in my life. And, that's great. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. For the cookies or dessert?
No, we were at the Dan in Mount Scopus first, which was terrible. Yeah. I don't know. My guess is it's cheaper. And then we moved to the involved for the show.
still can't believe it.
No.
And you know,
I wanna meet her.
the president of Argentina is seriously thinking of converting.
Yeah,
Well,
Aronoff was on the flight.
Yeah,
And
sure. I don't know if we wanna accept him.
more than
Judaism. I thought he worked. No,
Oh,
the president of
like
Argentina is
Mayor
righteous.
Chavez? Yeah, yeah.
He's highly sympathetic. And
Yeah.
He didn't have to convert
Actually, it's
everyone.
funny, they emailed me.
his spiritual advisor is a Chabad
For
rabbi
the
in.
Jewish Journal. I said, well, you
Seriously?
already did that.
He's
And they
the
said,
only
oh,
thing
for
he said
something
he was
else.
only
I said, okay.
convert.
All right, that's fine. Like, it's fine. I'm happy to do it, but if it's just another iteration of like LA rabbis, I did it. There was someone else in our company.
Oh, you can't give us it. Still paying for media. How's it doing? How's the economy doing?
Oh, he's killing it? Yeah.
What?
The Argentinian economy,
Yeah.
inflation is under control. I mean, he's done a great job. Yeah.
Are you kidding?
I spent a lot of time with Jesse Linsky.
Plus they have a kosher McDonald's. The only kosher McDonald's outside of Israel.
Where? I mean, is the Cook McDonald's outside of Israel? Is the Cook McDonald's outside of Israel?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cool.
Something you do every day.
Buenos Aires is also one of the only places you can get a kosher filet mignon.
Well, Buenos Aires, look, the meat in Buenos Aires is fantastic.
Because the Sephardi know how to remove the sciatic nerve.
Oh,
No, you gotta understand something, that before blood kosher, everybody knew how to remove the sciatic nerve.
Right, but then it was lost in Ashkenazi times.
My grandfather was butcher, he thought blood kosher was ridiculous, he said, you can't recognize the sciatic nerve.
Yeah, my last year was around.
My dad,
But we didn't
my
really
dad was
overlap
Buddhist, so
because,
at one
like,
point,
by the
Colin, you
time
probably
I
know
was
way more about what they declared.
Because in my
rules
fourth year, I had already
of things
done all these projects that I was
keep
doing.
kosher, right? So they had a
Because she and
boycott
I didn't
all
really, like, if you and I did a lot of stuff
the
together, like,
places
when I
there.
was.
So he was in this little town outside of Lodge there, on Boma. He was at the shop making sure that guy closed his.
You get a full He's, I forget his name. Oh, thank you. Okay, I think we'll get started, and therefore not rush, hopefully. Okay, so I wanna start off. Hey, Bob, I'm gonna start. We're gonna look at the sons Ephraim and Manasseh, who many of us probably know are the names of the people who we attribute the blessing to our sons on Shabbat. So we say Yasimcha Elohim ke Ephraim v'che Manasseh. We hope that you are like the sons Ephraim and Manasseh. And there's lots of reasons for why we believe we do that. One of them is that these brothers seem to get along, which is lovely. They also seem to be pretty good people, which is great. We're not going to talk about that right now, but I want to start off the class by saying I don't think we should change that. Based off of what we're going to learn today, I think that it is important that they are the people who we attribute this blessing and really this legacy to our sons every Shabbat. I think that no matter what we learn today and no matter what conclusions you come to, I think it's extremely important that these two people are the ones for whom our sons are blessed every Shabbat. So what we're going to talk about today is something that I had never really focused on so much, and in the story of Joseph. The story of Joseph is probably one of my top, if not my favorite stories in the Torah, not just because it's a really great musical. And if you ever want, Rabbi Klickfeld and I can sing every single word from start to finish of this musical for you. Well, that's what we should have done today. We should have just stood here and done. I should just throw away the papers. Just do it right now. So this is not a part of this parsha nor any of the Joseph story that I'd really focused on before. But what we're going to see in a moment is that Joseph marries someone who is an Egyptian. Now we know that there are other members of our history and of our Torah who have also married women who were not Jewish. So this isn't such an anomaly, but I think the anomaly or the thing that caught my eye was the fact that then their children are the ones who we use for this blessing. And so what does that say about who these children are, about how we feel about who we're blessing our children after, and also the fact that Jacob goes on to say that these are children of Israel, right? That these are grandchildren who should be seen as children of Israel and should be given the same kind of attributes and wealth that those children are going to get. So that was a very long introduction, which I don't usually give to you, but I wanted to set our scene here a little bit. I'm sorry that these copies are a little dark. I don't exactly know what happened, but hopefully you'll be able to read through them. Yeah, sure. Okay. So first we're just going to read through the verses of Torah here, okay? And we'll have about 25-ish minutes to do this, so we'll take some time. Okay. So Genesis 41:45. Vayikra Pharaoh Shem Yosef Tzafnat Paneach. Well, what do you first recognize in that line? It's not even the end of the sentence yet. What do you first notice? You can look in the English if you want. It's not a trick question.
Pharaoh changed Joseph's name?
Yeah. And what does he change his name to?
Tzafnat Paneach.
Right. And what does that name sound like Hebrew to us? Right. It's probably Egyptian. I mean, I don't know Egyptian as well as I know Hebrew, but it definitely doesn't sound like a typical Hebrew name, right? Yeah, Rebecca.
It doesn't sound like Hebrew, but I think it is because Safnat is
Yeah.
in the word Sofet,
Yeah.
which is so am I?
No, it's okay. Keep going.
And Hanach is to decipher.
Yeah. So we're going to see in just a moment, Rashi actually says exactly what Rebecca just said, that even though it doesn't sound like Hebrew, the roots of the words seem to be coming from at least Hebrew language that we do understand and that we do know. So we'll look at that in a second. But at first glance, it's not like he says, okay, your name is now going to be Adam, right? It's not like we're choosing a name that we know to be a very Jewishly related, let's say, or Hebraicized name. Vayiten lo et Osnat. So, and Pharaoh then gives Joseph Osnat, bat Potiphera. Who does that sound like? Kohen on leisha. So he gives this woman Osnat, who is the daughter of Potiphera. The rabbis have a lot to say on who this is, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. If you're interested in that, the Talmud and Midrash have a lot to say of who that might be. This Kohen of On, and he gives her to him to be his wife. So what do we know about Joseph's wife so far?
She's the daughter of a priest.
Okay, she's the daughter of a priest. Great.
And she was given by Pharaoh to Joseph as a wife.
Great. And she's given to Joseph to Pharaoh as a wife. And her name is Osnat. Very good, Rabbi Dr. Michael Berenbaum. Very good. Yes, exactly. What can we assume, even though we don't yet necessarily know, what can we assume about this person? She's Egyptian. Okay? Now, I kind of gave that away to you when I introed this whole class, but it seems to be that Joseph is being named something to potentially hide his Jewish identity, and he's also being given a wife who is not Jewish, right? Or is not a Hebrew, or is not a person of his tribe, okay? Because I recognize, by the way, when I say not Jewish, like that means something completely different now than it meant back in the day. So definitely is not a Hebrew, right? Is not someone who is of his same lineage, which is abnormal for how people have been married off thus far. Yeah.
Where would he find
Who? Joseph?
Were there any Hebrews there?
Under Pharaoh's regime? I mean, there were tons, right? The Hebrews were the people he was enslaving. Not yet, right. But in general, there were Hebrews around, right? The fact that Joseph was around, Joseph was brought into Pharaoh's, what's it called? No, not orbit. Kingdom, thank you. And so then we're going to be introduced to Hebrews in just a little while. So, right, in this particular moment, were there actual Hebrews, around? I don't know, I wasn't there. But I assume that because we are so soon to meet them in the Torah, that they were around. But also, Pharaoh doesn't have to give Joseph a wife, right? It's not really his job necessarily. He is taking Joseph under his wing, so if he thought that would be a way for him to provide Joseph with some stability, then sure. It seems to me that the reason that he was probably giving him a wife, as we'll see in just a few minutes, is more likely because he wants him to be seeing himself as in charge of Egypt. And so he's putting him in these roles, giving him a new name, putting him in a family where he's going to be able to take that lead. Yeah.
You live in Washington. If you want in the old days, if
Yeah.
you wanted a political career,
Yeah.
you needed a wife and child.
Right.
And consequently,
Right.
being single is not a virtue. If
Right.
you wanted to be a powerful person, you had to have the quotation mark stability
Correct.
of wife and child.
And I think that's exactly what's happening here. What Rabbi Berenbaum said is that Joseph, in order to be in some amount of power, needs to have a family, right? That's something that's going to also show power. And I think that's exactly what's happening, is that Pharaoh's setting him up. But interestingly, right, with an Egyptian family, not with, as Bob just pointed out, not with a family made up of Hebrews, which is where Joseph comes from. Okay. Vayetze Yosef al Eretz Mitzrayim. So, and then Joseph comes out. It says here in the English, in charge of the land of Egypt. It really just says in the Hebrew that Joseph goes out to Eretz Mitzrayim. The way that I picture this is kind of like, in Evita, where she comes out with her hands out, like she's ready to take over this kingdom and these people. But to Rabbi Berenbaum's point, and to the point that I was making a few moments ago, it seems these other things need to be set in place before he can do that. before Joseph can have that kind of power. Anybody have any questions about what we've talked about thus far? Okay. The next few verses we won't spend as much time on. It's just going to give you context for where we are. Uliosef yulad shnei vanim beterem tavo shnat hara'av. So before the years of famine, Joseph had 2 sons. Asher yalda lo Osnat. Osnat is the mother of those 2 sons. Bat Potiphera kohen avon. To remind you who that is from 5 verses ago, she's his wife, and this was her father. Vayikra Yosef et Shem HaBechor Menashe. So the name of the older son is Menashe. Ki nasani Elokim et kol amali ve'et kol beit avi. So Joseph named him Menashe because, quote, God has made me forget completely my hardship and my parental home. And the second child is Ephraim. Ki hifrani Elohim be'eretz oni. So God has made me fertile in a land of my affliction. Yeah.
The very interesting thing is if you think of the values associated with the name,
Yeah.
there is no way on earth that the name of Menashe
Yeah.
should take priority over the name of Ephraim, because the entire sense
Yeah.
of the Torah is you're not supposed to forget your parents' home.
Uh-huh.
And look at how we end up in the narrative recalling all of the struggles and what we've done with it. So Ephraim is the key, because Ephraim he's made fruitful
Yeah.
or fertile in the land of his affliction.
Sure.
Which is how the Jewish people have responded
Yeah.
throughout the narrative to the land of affliction.
Okay.
In other words, you don't merely take it, but you find a way to live in it and become able to do it. So if you think of what Menashe is, I've forgotten the whole thing. I now emerge triumphant,
Yeah.
and that's not a good message. That's not a good message, and in fact, it's antithetical to what the Jews have done throughout their history.
All right. Rabbi Berman has a drash for next Shabbat, everyone. It's interesting. I where I thought you were going is not where you went, but I was curious if what that meant for you was that the firstborn should have been named Ephraim and the secondborn should have been named Menashe.
No, firstly, nobody should have been named Menashe.
All right, great. Well, there we go.
That's not our value.
Right.
But
Okay.
if you think of what Ephraim represents,
Yeah.
Ephraim represents precisely the instruction of
Right.
how to live, even
Right.
amidst affliction.
All right. So if Ephraim is named well and Menashe, there should have been a second chance. But yes, it is interesting. We're going to see in just a few moments why it's important that they were named with these types of attributes. The commentary does not go as far as Rabbi Berenbaum just went, but the idea that they were actually named for these particular things rather than something that came before them, but rather are foreshadowing and bringing something in the future rather than something that has befallen their parents before them. And as Rabbi Berenbaum pointed out, maybe Menashe's should not have been this at all to begin with. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
Let me just.
Okay.
It's an interesting character
Yeah.
example of who Joseph is.
Uh-huh.
Joseph is telling you, I've now emerged triumphant, I forget the whole thing.
Right.
And that tells us a little bit. If you name a child, that's one of the first things of calling a kid into being.
Right.
And consequently, it says an awful lot about who you are.
Sure. Yeah.
So here he's saying, I got rid of my past.
Yeah.
Will become my past.
Right, which again, going back to what we're going to talk about right here, is potentially true, right? Not that we want to see that as a value, but it's potentially exactly what happened, or at least in that moment, is exactly what he was going through. Okay. Rashi says about this name that Yosef is given by Pharaoh that it means the explainer of hidden things, right? So back to what Rebecca was pointing out, that maybe, in fact, it is Hebrew, or at least we can find Hebrew within it to understand what it meant. But there's no other example of this in our Torah or anywhere in, it calls it scripture, but in our Mikra, right? There's no other mention of this anywhere in what we're reading. Okay, Sforno then says on that same verse, but about the last part of it, when Joseph goes out and now he's in charge of all of Egypt, that means, I love this language. I think this is very, very funny. That he goes, that the English does not actually reflect what the Hebrew says, but it uses the word interview in the English, which I think is hysterical. He walks away from Pharaoh, but it says he walks away from the interview in a manner which indicated that he was now the ruler of the whole nation, right? He walks away from this moment, being given a new name, being given a wife, and says, great, this is now who I am, and I'm going to be completely in charge of this nation with this new identity and with this family, to go back to Rabbi Berenbaum's point of now things have been set up for me so that I can then approach this nation. And why is it important that he have an Egyptian identity to rule their nation? Irv?
People are not going to stand for a
Great.
Jewish person or anyone else ruling.
Great. So maybe it would be harder to have a Hebrew come in front of them and say, "Now I'm going to be in charge of all of you." Why else? Were you going to say something, Brian?
To me, it's a bit foreshadowing. Pharaoh gives Joseph a new name, and Osnat is a wife, and that's the daughter of a priest. Shifra and Pua give Moses his name when they draw him out of the water.
Nice.
And then Moses goes and marries the daughter of a priest who is not Jewish.
Correct.
And then, with that new name, new identity, goes and rules.
Interesting. Nice. It's also the case that when you are about to lead a group of people, no matter who it is, right? When I do Tat Shabbat, I don't stand up here behind a bima. I get on the floor and sit on a parachute, right? You want to become part of who the people are that you're leading, right? And sometimes that is changing your name. Sometimes that is changing a part of your identity. But sometimes that's just recognizing the things that are going to make you seen as comparable and also like figures to that who you are leading, right? So that's what's happening here to Joseph, is that he's being made into a character who they will be able to see themselves also reflected in. Okay? Anybody else want to say something? Did I see a hand before? Okay. Rabbeinu Bachya has one more thing to say on this name, and then we're gonna turn the page. So, he uses the same sort of definition that Rashi gives, but says it differently. The one who reveals secrets. So, we do encounter this word in nishmat, which I think is really interesting. And the prayer that we say on Shabbat mornings, nishmat kol chai, this actually is the second word here. Paneach is found in a different conjugation in the word nishmat kol chai, which does show us that in some way, even if it was made to sound like Egyptian, that there was reason to believe that its essence also comes from Hebrew, so much so that it's also found in our own liturgy. So that's the only reason I wanted to bring that. Sorry?
That's a reach.
Yeah, it's definitely a reach, but it's nice, which is why I brought it. Okay, Radak. Let's go to sorry, not Radak. Let's go to the Kedushat Levi. I don't wanna continue talking about his name right now. Okay, so now the Kedushat Levi has a question about why we need to know that he's in Egypt, right? We already know that, and so there's this moment here where it's not actually in the this is not based off of the verses that I brought you, but the context is connected. But there's this moment where it says that he's already been in Egypt, and so it's going to bring us back to this moment where he's now been given this name and this identity. So the Kedushat Levi says, we need to examine why the Torah had to repeat the word b'mitzrayim. Again, this isn't a verse that's not on your sheet. Perhaps the Torah wanted to stress that during all the years that Joseph had been in Egypt without the moral support of his family, he had not changed his name. Right? Again, this is why I'm bringing this source. It's not on a verse that we're looking at, but it's on the context that we're looking at. Content that we're looking at, sorry. he himself, Joseph, used to refer to himself by his Jewish name. So even though he was given this name that is being referred to by our commentators as Egyptian, even though there is Hebrew within its essence, he himself, Joseph, used to still refer to himself as Joseph. Right? He wasn't using his Egyptian name. That was the name that was being used out in front of the people he was leading and the way in which he was being referred to, but it wasn't the way that he was referring to himself. A very easy example, though not at all the same thing, is I don't refer to myself as Rabbi Schatz. I refer to myself as Rebecca because that's my name, right? Whereas people who I'm talking to, potentially, given the situation, would call me Rabbi Schatz, right? So he is still going back to his essence of the name that he has. Even Pharaoh realized this, the Kedushat Levi says, when during the early days of the famine, he had instructed the people to turn to Joseph for help. Lechu el Yosef. So Pharaoh even realized that Joseph, in moments where he was helping others, or maybe in more like intimate moments where it wasn't so top down, that he was being referred to as Joseph, and therefore Pharaoh was also referring to him as Joseph, not as this new name that he had given him as leader over these Egyptians. Thoughts, comments, criticisms on this? Yeah.
Yeah, when you're in a crisis, you can't be worried about this name or that name. You just,
Okay.
I think the crisis is what caused Pharaoh not to use the title name.
Interesting.
Just in case he screwed up. It's Joseph who did it, not this guy.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to say that Pharaoh chose to use that name. It seems to say that what was happening was that Pharaoh recognized that Joseph was using his name in those kinds of moments, and so Pharaoh then used that name as well. But I think you're right that in a moment where you're not thinking straight, people just call people whatever they want to call them. Yeah. Yeah.
Could also be that it could be, it's a non-Rashi reading of Safnat Panea.
Yeah.
Which is, Safnat Panea may have been the formal title that Pharaoh gave.
Right. Right.
And therefore he said, go to Joe, who may be minister of so-and-so.
Yeah.
But it could be that for Pharaoh Safnat Panea, this is an anointment to an appointment to an Egyptian position.
Great.
And
Okay.
therefore, when he says go to Joe,
Yeah.
to Joseph, that means a different thing.
Great.
But it's not reading it like Rashi.
No. But again, that shows that there is some kind of change of identity or even change of role, right? When being called one name versus the other, and that.
If you're coming out of prison,
Yeah.
and you've been, in prison for slavery, and you're coming out, you're standing with Pharaoh, and now you come out a minister, there surely is a minor change of identity.
Sure, though he doesn't get to choose that identity.
Yeah.
Right. So there is this moment of, yes, of course, our identities are changing constantly, and yet what it seems to be showing us in the Torah is that he comes out one way and does get lifted up by Pharaoh in this really powerful manner, and then is given this name to be able to infuse that power. Brian, was that your hand?
No.
Okay. Was there another hand? Any other thoughts on this? We're going to now move to the Ephraim and Manasseh piece. So are there any thoughts on this particular lead-in here? Okay, so before we look at the kind of connection into Ephraim and Manasseh, I want to just say what we've so far understood about this change, whether it's in identity or power making or whatever, is that Joseph needed to be situated in such a way that people were going to be able to refer to him in power the way that, it doesn't say this anywhere, but they were used to, right? That it was going to be someone who acted like and seemed like and was now tribally part of their milieu, right? What they would have expected as a person in power in front of them. As opposed to this Hebrew who came along and knows a thing or two about dreams, and Pharaoh seems to like him, and so sure, let's put him in power. Now he seems to be someone who is coming to power, who has a knowledge of the people that he's going to be overseeing. Okay. What I'm about to share is also just a nod to the fact that Safaria now has this new commentary as an option, and I have loved for the past week being able to work with B'nai Mitzvah kids and show them that the women's commentary is also now on Safaria. I think that's a very cool thing. It hasn't always been so fruitful, but it's been a very it's been a really wonderful thing to be able to show young people. So this actually was quite fruitful, and this is where this session came from, was this particular commentary. So it says here, and by the way, this is a book. The Torah, a woman's commentary, is a book that I have on my shelf, and that's a wonderful resource. Osnat bears Menashe and Ephraim to Joseph. So Osnat has Ephraim and Menashe, not in that order, and she has them with Joseph. Okay, I'm just going to make that very, very, very clear. The names of Joseph's sons reflect their father's circumstances and embody his longing to forget his past. There you go, Rabbi Berenbaum. And his hope to success through Ephraim. So what this commentary is telling us, yeah. Well, we're not done yet. Yeah, I'm one sentence in. Yeah.
If Ronnie is already, it's given the tense, it's not God will make me, God has made me. If Ronnie Elohim Baritz not Riyah.
Yeah, okay.
God has made me fruitful. It's already
Yeah.
accomplished.
Okay.
So it's not quite a pet. It's not quite a hope for the future. It's
Okay.
already
A thing that's happening.
It's
Right.
not aspirational, it's achievement.
Okay, great. So this idea here, though, that the sons are now going to reflect Joseph, right, in any manner, in the Berenbaum manner or in this manner, they're going to reflect Joseph rather than, in contrast to Jacob's sons, whose names bear the hopes and circumstances of their mothers, Leah and Rachel. So if we think back to 2 parshiot ago, where all of where all of the children are being listed, right? We are told as each one is born why they are named that, and it is often because of what the mothers are then attributing to that child's name. In this case, it's because of Joseph, not because of Osnat, which already gives us an idea here of how of the direction these children are going to go in terms of their lineage or their like tribal identity, right? Is everybody with me so far and how I'm getting there? So Rachel and Leah, right, were able to name their children and have them named things that that made sense for the way in which they hoped for them to be. Well, not necessarily hoped, but the way in which they were brought into the world and potentially what was going to happen to them in the future. This here is because of Joseph's, potentially the things that have already happened or the hopes and dreams for what was going to come for them. So father versus mother. These sons' names say nothing about Osnat's aspirations. Her sons, progenitors of the tribes of Menashe and Ephraim, are not only linked to the family of Israel, but also are descendants of an Egyptian priestly heritage, right? We remember every time we hear her name, we also are reminded that she is the daughter of a priest. Jacob later recognizes both of these sons as full heirs to the Israelite lineage. So this is very, very, very interesting in terms of, again, going back to the introduction of every Friday night, we give a blessing to our sons to be like these 2 children for whom they came from a lineage that actually we are not fully connected to. They came from 2 different strands, one Hebrew, one Egyptian, and we in this room, unless some of you have Egyptian in your background, I don't know, are not blessing our children with the idea in mind that they are coming from both Hebrew or both Jewish and Egyptian heritage, right? And it's fascinating that within their names, we are actually putting that into the world. And what we see here at the end of this commentary, and we'll read in a second where this comes from in this week's parsha, this idea that that they are given, Jacob gives them the blessing that they are going to continue on the legacy of his lineage. And so that too is a fascinating way of bringing Joseph out of his kind of change of identity so that he can be some guy to a different, let's call them tribe for now, to then say, but the children are going to follow and be the future for the Hebrew side of the story. Rebecca.
Going back to the previous,
The Kushat Levi?
yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like what he's trying to say is basically even Pharaoh saw Joseph even after giving him the name
Yeah.
as a Jew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not only did he stay Jewish, but his family was seen as Jewish.
Sure.
In that respect, it kind of feeds into.
Yeah, beautiful. Right. I think that is what the Kedushat Levi is getting at, is that there was like an inner and an outer, right? That the outer was this Egyptian, I don't want to say facade, this Egyptian identity that was being worn as a way of being a leader to the Egyptians. And even Pharaoh could identify that there was that Hebrew identity on the inside of Joseph that was very much still there and then was passed along to his children. Yeah, Bob. Ephraim and Manasseh. I've never heard that they were Egyptian. I think they're.
It says that it gives the meaning, but it doesn't say the meaning from what language.
Yeah, I've never heard that. Maybe someone else in the room knows better than I. I've never heard that they're Egyptian. I've only ever heard that they were Hebrew names. But
Is that what Ephraim means? Is that what Manasseh
well,
means?
Ephraim means the name that's been, that, in other words, the name, the explanation that Joseph gave for Ephraim is what Ephraim means.
right. So the way in which we understand it, right, is based off of what Joseph then says about it. So yes, is the answer to your question, Seth.
So in the women's commentary,
Yeah.
takes the character behind these names and points back a generation to
Yeah.
Joseph.
Yeah.
I don't know if this reading holds water, so I'll say what if the meaning of the character of these names also points ahead to the generation of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of Hebrews in Egypt and then killing of their sons.
Yeah.
And also maybe in the case of Menashe, the Hebrews that assimilated.
So what's the so you're saying that this is maybe pointing us towards what's going to happen in the future, like a foreshadowing? Yeah, it could be, and I think that's what the women's commentary started to is saying, that Rabbi Berenbaum was then saying that he was disagreeing with, but that this idea potentially is that these names is what Joseph hopes is going to then happen for these children, then bringing them into their next generations. Is that what you're saying, Seth? And then it's going to foreshadow these other mirrored experiences that are going to come along in in Moshe's story afterwards. Okay, I just want to very briefly show us this, and then we're going to bench and do Mariv. So what we're going to see later on in 7 chapters from now, you're going to see that then, I'll just read it. Now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt shall be mine. Right? Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, no less than Reuben and Shimon. So this is Jacob talking, saying that my grandchildren, Joseph's sons, are going to be to me like sons, like my other sons, like Reuben and Shimon. And then, and this is a just point in between so that you can understand where we're at. Rashi understands this to mean that Ephraim and Manasseh will each inherit a portion in the land of Israel, along with all the other tribes. Exactly the same as these other tribes. Ephraim and Manasseh will now be put up, even as grandchildren, to what the sons received. Jacob then notices his grandchildren, but doesn't recognize them. When Joseph identifies them as his sons, Jacob blesses them. And that's when you get Hamalach HaGoel, which we now sing very often. But it says in English, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the lads. And them may my name be recalled, and the names of my fathers Avraham and Yitzchak, and may they be teeming multitudes upon the earth. So it goes as far as to recognize them not just as grandchildren, but as children, which in a tribal world is important. That status is important because of what you then receive. And so what I wanted us to see in this teaching is that there is something about identity that is very important, especially with Joseph in terms of his in and out of these different identities throughout his story and our knowing of him and his story, but that his children seem to always be on a path. His children seem to always have this Hebrew identity, and we recognize it every single week, even in the modern day. And so even within this kind of fluctuation or maybe even oscillation of Joseph's identity in and out of Egyptian to Hebrew, that there's some Yiddishkeit that's in these children that then is passed down and that we still hold today. Okay, last word, and then we'll bench.
So I had to weave this in somehow.
Great.
So, given the fact that Rashi understands this to mean that I'm not so easy,
Yeah.
real, and these guys are patrilineality of not looking at Rashi, but perhaps I should. Can one therefore say that Rashi extrapolated this and was a patrilinealist, or did he not comment on it?
Well, he definitely didn't comment on it here.
I mean, he says that he says that Ephraim and Manasseh are the same as everybody else. He doesn't.
Right.
He doesn't expand that.
Yeah, right. That's what I meant.
To everybody.
Right.
But I'm just curious whether he in fact says anything about it, because that would be the logical conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, the within the Torah, most everything goes according to patrilineal anything, right? So everything that you acquire has to do with if you're a male, if you're a firstborn, if you're from your father, all those things. So I don't know that Rashi expands on it elsewhere. I definitely could look to see if he does. I don't think it was so. It wasn't such a niche thing to expose, right? Because everything else was also patrilineal. So I think in today's day, when we are thinking of in the conservative and Orthodox movements that your mother is the one who makes you or who assigns you religion at birth, right? That's new, as opposed to in the Torah, where I think it was much more kind of known that it was all going to be patrilineal to begin with. So I don't know that Rashi would have expanded upon it, but Rabbi Berenbaum seems to.
It's sociologically more complex.
Okay, go for it.
The reason for matrilineal is until DNA we were 100% sure who the mother was and the father was an act of faith. Now, having said that, one of the sociological implications is that the father takes notice of the child as his in all of the ceremonies of child naming, in both the Brit and the name of the girl. It is the son of the daughter of the name of the father, and in traditional, before we were egalitarian, traditional thing, when you're called to the Torah, you're called the son of so-and-so, which is a public proclamation of the acceptance of fatherhood. That also became important, and Rabbi Schatz had a very interesting thing. Remember, the problem with inside-outside is when you live in lands in which there is a problem between who you are and how you appear in public and what you relate to. So there are books called Mr. Inside, Mr. Outside, and the question, and the rabbis were very, very mindful of the fact that you have to say the Jews, wherever they are, did not lose their identity. They didn't change their name. They didn't change the language. They didn't adapt, which is not quite true, because if you look at Ladino, you look at Yiddish, you look at a whole range of things. But the sociology of it is the mother's guaranteed, the father is an act of faith, which becomes
Sociology was.
what? Was until DNA.
All right, Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for learning. Brian.
But first we're going to do
Hadith Rabbanan.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah v'almad yivrach Hirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayei chon v'yamei chon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman karib yimru amen Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach le'olam le'omei almaya Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Dekudesha B'richu Ela min kol berachata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata tamilan v'alma v'imru amen Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Tamidehon v'al kol Tamidei Tamidehon v'al kol man daskim b'raita diviatra hadain v'di b'chol atar v'atar Yehei lahon l'chon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamim chayin arichin v'chunara v'cha v'furkana min kodam avahondi v'shmaya v'imru amen Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya Chaim tovim al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Oseh shalom v'romav Urachama v'yaseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen 264 V'hurachum yichab harabon v'lo yashki b'rbal shiva povler v'lo yerkol chamato Adonai Hashem melech yaneinu v'yom koreinu Baruch Hu
Charles
Adonai
Minhag is to
Hamborach
mute.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam ba'eh Baruch Adonai El chai v'kayam tamidim lo chaleinu le'olam v'ed Baruch Ata Adonai Hamari v'aravim Abat Olam V'abatcha al tasim mimenu li'olamim Baruch Ata Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Adonai Elohechem emeh b'menakos v'abikayim Hasan nafshenu b'chayim U'malchuto b'ratzon kiblu Eleihem Moshe v'nei Yisrael achanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam Mi chamocha b'lim Adonai Mi chamocha nar b'kodesh narati lo osef Malchutacha rabba nachba keyam lifnei Moshe ze Elianu v'yamru Adonai emloch le'olam bad v'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu Baruch ata Adonai ga'al Yisrael hashkivenu Adonai Ushmor tzeiteinu uvoinu l'chaim l'shalom yata v'yad olam Baruch ata Adonai shomer amo Yisrael ad Baruch Adonai Olam amen המלכות שלך היא, וליום מעט תמלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ועל כל מעשיו. יתקדש יקדש שמר רבה, ילמד יברכותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון וחי דכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. הישמר רבם וברח לעולם, לעלמי עלמי יברך וישתבח ויתשבח וידעם ונעשה ותדע ותלך ותלש ונקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה שבותה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Not yet finished, you're on me down. Please continue at your own pace. We're on page 279 at the top of the page.
יקדש יקדש שמר רבה, ילמד יברכותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון וחי דכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. הישמר רבם וברח לעולם, לעלמי עלמי יברך וישתבח ויתפאר שמם ונעשה ותדע ותלך ותלש ונקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ותשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. והנה אדוני אלוהינו עלינו מעשה ידינו כוננה עלינו מעשה ידינו כוננהו יושב בסתר עליון בצל שדי לנו. לא תירא מפח הלילה מחץ יעוף יומם מדבר לאובן אלוה מקדש אבותיי. כי מלאך רב יצא ולך לשמוך בכל שחר על כפיים צורך כפיים דקוף. יקראני ועיני אלוהי נוחי בצר אחל צה ויחבדהו אורך ימים משביעהו וירא בשועתי אורך ימים משביעהו וירא בשועתי.
2:16.
Second paragraph. ואתה קדוש יושב תילו ישול הקרזל זה ויאמר קדוש 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 נעש וכל רגעו יקבל די מידי מידי קדיש בשמי. ותישאני רוח ואשמע אחרי כל רעש גדול ברוך אדוני מכל העולם. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד מלכותך. ויבטחו בך יהודי שמך כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני אדוני חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה ויאדיר יקדש שמר רבה ועמד יברכתי ועמך מלכותי בך יכון וימכון אוכי דכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמר רבה מברך לעולם לעלמי עלמי יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר שמו ויתעשה ויתהדר ותלך ותלש ונקודשה בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושורתה ותשובתה ורחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. תקבל סוטון ובתון דכל ישראל קודה בהוני ושמי ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמי וחיים עלינו בכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום אמרו מה הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל התקו ועל יוסר וכל עמים. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני מלך לעולם ונאמר ויהיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
2:82 Mourner's Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא יברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימיכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם לעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתשמם ויתנשא יתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו ואלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום מרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Good.
Na 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 הנה ישועתי אפתח ולא אפחד כי עוזי וזמרתיה אדוני ויהי לי לישועה ושפתם מים מששון ממעייני הישועה לאדוני הישועה על עמך ברכתך צלה אדוני צבאות עמנו משכב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלה אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו ליהודים הייתה אורה בשמחה וששון ויקר תהיה לנו כוס ישועתך, ובשם אדוני אקרא, יענני, יענני, יענני. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei vesamim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei me'orei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amim ben yom hashvihi le'sheshet yamei hamaseh. Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Zarenu v'chasbenu yarbe yarbe kacho v'kakochavim balayla. Zarenu v'chasbenu yarbe yarbe kacho v'kakochavim balayla. Shavua tov, 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 Shavua tov. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishmi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu hagidati. Imera ve'yameinu, Yavo eleinu. Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David. Shavua Tov, everyone. Minyan tomorrow at 8 a.m. No other announcements. Oh, Chag Urim Sameach. Happy Hanukkah.
On Wednesday.
4:35. It changes.
Hi, it's Gary.
Very exciting.
Marlies.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to.
Hi, table. Hi, table. Hello, table.
There we go. Okay, there's my Detroit guy.